I'd like to welcome you to the panel on investment and infrastructure. My name is David Martinez. I'm a professor of American Indian and Transborder Studies. And I have the honor of moderating this afternoon's panel. And so I'm going to follow the instructions that I was given from the organizers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the panelists. And I'm going to ask a leading question. And then I'm going to let the panelists answer my questions one at a time. I was told that you have 10 minutes a piece, to answer, but whatever is natural and necessary, we'll proceed with that. All right. First up is Marisa Walker. Marisa is the Senior VP of Planning and Infrastructure at the Arizona Commerce Authority, ACA, where she leverages the relationship between economic development strategies, infrastructure, assets, investments in key areas such as the Canamex corridor. My text is cut off. I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the name, and then ask my question, and then when you take your turn, say a little bit more about yourself but before answering. We'll do it that way. And so once again, on my far left is Marisa Walker. And then we have here Kenneth Van Winkle. Is that the fellow that's missing? Luis Denton Martinez. If you'll raise your hand so I know who you are, and the audience does too. I'm meeting a lot of new people today, which has been wonderful. Also joining us is Jorge Aguirre and Rodrigo Bulos. All right. So my question is a two-parter for the panel. What are the factors driving closer ties between Arizona and Mexico? And what are the main challenges jeopardizing these ties? And so, which end of the couch wants to go first? Ladies first, we'll go with that tradition.
Okay. Well, let me just maybe add a little bit more context about who I am. So I work for the state's Economic Development Organization. And we've actually, for many years, been working closely with Mexico. Many of you are probably familiar with the Lucid big project, and one of the main reasons we were able to lure Lucid to the region was the strong collaboration with our partners in Sonora. We actually held hands, took them down to the Hermosillo plant, and showed them that there was a supply chain capability in the region. And there's been many of those types of examples. I will, in full disclosure, too, mention that for the last several years, since 2018, I've been running a public-private partnership around advanced mobility, looking at opportunities around connected vehicles. Many of you probably have seen the Waymo vehicles that are moving through the region, the self-driving vehicle technology. We're also looking at it from air as well, drones and advanced air mobility, flying cars, as they like to suggest. And I think those are other rich areas for our potential collaboration with Sonora. But just to put a little finer point on it, and one thing that I hope we get a chance to talk a little bit more about from an infrastructure perspective, certainly I heard both in specific sectors. One of my pieces of my portfolio is semiconductor as well as space. And I think there's areas around the existing trade relationship between Arizona and Sonora that are going to continue to facilitate that. I think one of our third largest exchanges in a trade perspective is around semiconductor and electronics. But also lots of interest around vertiports and being able to collaborate with Mexico in that area as well. But my real passion for decades now, I won't overdate myself, has been in the border region and the infrastructure work that's been going on in our border communities around the trade facilitating infrastructure. Frankly, we talk a lot about the $8 million or the $9 billion that are going back and forth across the border, but when you look at the border communities, they're actually facilitating billions of dollars in movement every day going across our border in both directions. It's a trade relationship that enables access to goods and services that fuel the entire United States. In fact, I think there was a about $1.1 billion that is utilizing the ports, the Arizona Sonora ports of entry in order to bring largely fruits and vegetables, things that we enjoy, particularly in the winter months, all throughout the United States and Canada. And similarly, I think $1.9 billion heading south into Mexico. And that's really an exchange of the ways in which we build things together. So I think in respect to what are the real opportunities, I think it got mentioned today possibly by our governor in her remarks. It's been for the last 65 years, we've had a formalized relationship starting with our two governors that has, like any traditional marriage, has had its own ebbs and flows associated with it, but it's that consistency of the people that are kind of maybe in the background that are keeping those connections together. And I think that's going to be one of our greatest continued strength in what we can do. I often look at my colleagues in Texas and California who I have great admiration for, but when I think about the ways in which we punch above our weight, it often gets overlooked. Arizona and Sonora have literally collectively brought billions of dollars of investment. In fact, I think my colleague Luis Ramirez is somewhere in the room, and we're going through a remodernization of two of the ports of entry along the border, and I think that's going to be really key. I think probably one of the biggest challenges that we have, and this is not going to be any surprise to the folks around this room, is my concern about politics and how that sometimes sets us back in our effort to really be productive. One of the things when I first moved down to Arizona in '93, our two states were involved in one of the boldest innovative ideas around a strategic economic development vision for the Arizona-Sonora region. This was this bold concept that we were literally going to combine our two regions. We had the universities in both states working diligently with the private sector and government in order to better understand what our strengths were, what our challenges, what the opportunities were associated with it. And I think that historical capability is going to what hopefully gets us over those lulls associated sometimes with politics.
Now it's on. Yes. Pleasure being here with you. My name is Luis Danton Martinez. I want to thank Mate and Jesus, the Arizona State University and the School of Transborder Studies for this opportunity to be here with you. And what I bring to the table in this panel is my experience as a lawyer. I'm the founding partner of a litigation, corporate and financial law firm based in Mexico City. Most of my work has to do with conflict and investment, and I think at the center of the discussion is the current state of rule of law in Mexico. We heard the vision from the government, which is kind of rosy. In reality, we just had approved a reform that completely revamps or changes the judiciary branch that was approved in a gym. It wasn't approved in the building of Congress because they couldn't access Congress because the entire judiciary is on strike or on protest. Students mobilized, so they weren't able to access Congress to discuss and to vote this very important reform that will affect the rule of law in Mexico, and that is creating a very costly uncertainty. And we will have time to speak about that, but that's one aspect. The other aspect, and we spoke about the free trade agreement between Mexico, the US, and Canada, is, and it has to do with my professional experiences, Chapter 12, which has to do with anti-corruption and which has to do with having a level playing field for investment. And I think that's another thing that is also related to rule of law and that is essential as part of the discussion of incentivizing bringing investment into Mexico, which I think is a prerequisite to bring our economies together and to be able to do shared projects and create wealth in our region.
Mr. Boulos.
Thank you. Let me stand so I can see you as well. So my name is Rodrigo Boulos. I'm Brazilian. I work for JP Morgan, and I've been here in California. I'm based in Los Angeles for the last 6 years. Before that, I lived in Middle East for many years, and before that, in Brazil. There is no doubt that what lies ahead is very positive for both the south of the United States and Mexico, but it could also be very transformative to the region. It could bring Mexico and the south of U.S. to a new levels, not only economically, trade of goods, trade of service, including tourism, but also social change. It could be very important. We talked to thousands actually of companies in the U.S. and in the region, and the nearshoring and even onshoring is top of mind. There is a lot of interest in that. We think there is still potential. I mean, there is a lot of interest, but are the investment coming? They are, right? But it seems like the gap is huge, and what lies ahead is really, really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Want to thank to ASU and Jesus Martinez also for Jesus Rodriguez for the invitation, this important panel, and how to share between Mexico and Arizona all the opportunities. My name is Jorge Aguirre Robles, and I'm the Vice President of Sonora, Arizona Commission from the side of the businessman. Also, I am Vice President of the Chamber of Construction in Mexico, called CEMIC, in Mexico City. And my work is CEO as a construction company called Virgo, that we work all over Mexico, dedicated to energy, water, commercial, industrial, and infrastructure projects all over Mexico. There's no doubt that Arizona has become a global hub for business in recent years, as evidence its records in investments. The state is attractive due to its innovation clusters and strategic location at the U.S.-Mexico border. Likewise, Mexico has regained its status as a top global recipient of foreign direct investment. Our famous nearshoring name brand right now that taken a look to bring all the suppliers near to America. However, Arizona and Mexico need to leverage their proximity and partnership to build a more competitive region with lower cost and enhance infrastructure to successfully compete with other regions around the world. Right now, with data of 222, Mexico is Arizona's largest traded partner times 4. Arizona two-way trade with Mexico was approx 20 billion. And if we compare with California, with Baja California, was 98 billion. And comparing another states from the border is Texas with Nuevo León and Coahuila. The trade was of 223 billion. So if we compare our relationship right now between Sonora and Arizona, we can see the huge opportunity and gap we have to work between Sonora and Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you. In the spirit of transparency, I should point out that my background in American Indian and Transborder studies is as an O'odham cultural historian. So what I mean by transparency is that I absolutely know nothing about business and investment and infrastructure and all this. So I'm just standing up here like, what are these guys talking about? But But I do want to ask you guys, because I'm fascinated by this. I'm teaching a class right now on human rights along the southern border, in particular as these impact indigenous people. And so the focus is on the kind of crisis that we hear about in the news all the time. And so what I'm fascinated by is that when it comes to the realm of business and finance, what I'm hearing is that the relationship between Mexico and the United States it's an open border. It almost sounds like the European Union to me. And that is contrary to the kind of things that my students and I discuss all the time, where we're always dealing with border patrol abuses, and the lack of access that people have, especially indigenous people have, to both sides of the border, and so I'm having to teach my students about what they need to do in order to be able to transport culturally sensitive items across the border. Yet, in this other realm of commerce, this is like, the trucks can flow freely back and forth with no problem. So my question is this. Is it the case that in the realm of business and finance, which you represent, is it the case that the border is in fact an open border? And if it is an open border, is business and finance able to operate without having to worry about the changing winds of politics? In other words, does it matter who's in the White House or?
So, David, I guess we've misinformed you. Trade does go through. It's not like our opening discussion about a time where the protocols of security were less. They've only increased, right? But there are a lot of creative people on both sides of the border that are working with Customs and Border Protection and to some degree, obviously, Border Patrol, to try to figure out how do we make you feel that we're getting some security in the chain of custody of goods, while at the same time not halting. Because one of the things with business is minutes matter. This is the whole just-in-time concept, and that works against our competitive advantage if it takes people hours and hours and hours to get across the border. And in some cases, people do take hours and hours and hours to get across the border. But we've been, over time, working diligently to say, well, look, are there ways that we could be innovative about this? And some of it has to do with infrastructure. Several folks in this area have probably recall working with Sedena, who is the equivalent, it's Mexico's military. And essentially, they have one of the distinguishable checkpoints south of Querobabi that literally you could see lines for hours, miles and miles of these trucks in there. And one of the challenges with Sedena is that their metrics is basically, look, we interdict and we sometimes find drugs. So check, this works for us. The contrast for Customs and Border Protection is that they also have to at least try to balance the economic fluidity of trade. So you try to have those conversations with those entities, and in the case of the checkpoint in Querobabi, the idea was, could we expand the lanes? Could we put some X-ray machines, VACUS machines there, that their workers could then look into the vehicle? Because frankly, there are illicit activities that are going on. There's some crafty people on that side of the fence as well, too. So I don't want you to be left with the impression, and I heard from Luis, that there's still, I don't know if the terminology is securitization of the land that enables you to be able to have some fluidity there on purchasing property in Mexico and vice versa. I'm probably mangling there are challenges, but there are so many people that this is our life, that you're dedicated to try to figure out how do we make it better? How do we address, similar to what it sounds like you are having conversations with your students, right, on an everyday basis?
Thank you.
I guess it's both things. It's a physical reality, but it's also a mental construct. And our neighborhood is so close that there's so many things in common that blur this barrier. And in terms of the economic integration, manufacturing-wise, there are components that cross the border several times before you have a finished product. So it's really complex. You have border infrastructure like the airport in Tijuana and San Diego, where you land in Tijuana and you crosswalk in the border. So it's a very nuanced reality, the border, I think. And in terms of financial flows, I mean, there really is no border. It's just like instantaneous movement of numbers in a screen that creates a financial reality elsewhere. No? So it's a fascinating thing about borders. I was interested to hear Roberto Velázquez mention that benchmark of the border being the equivalent of from Barcelona to Moscow. It's something I never thought had that size, no? Because we just think it's the U.S. and Mexico, and we're so similar and so close in our neighborhood, but it's really a huge border.
Right. Thank you.
I think that the custom protection will always will only increase from here on, which means that it will require a lot of investment in terms of productivity and railroads and infrastructure. Just to give you an idea, in 2018, when U.S. started increasing taxes on China export was equivalent to all the rest of Asia export combined. So the discussion at the point was what kind of infrastructure, basically to steal 20% of China export meant having 20% more infrastructure to deal with that. That without mention employees and people and other things. So the nearshoring, which we are already seeing, means that a lot of the investment that we saw in China, not only local investment, but foreign investor, in 2020, it was something around $200 billion a year. Now it's around $70 billion in China. Mexico increased a lot, but it's still $40 billion. A lot more should come. So the infrastructure scenario should be completely different to absorb the nearshoring that we potentially can get. A lot of countries in Asia were not able to absorb it. Vietnam absorbed a little bit, India absorbed a little bit, Bangladesh, and mostly in apparel, partially in tech. But Mexico has the potential to steal a lot of that and capture a lot of that. But if the investment in infrastructure, in clean energy, in productivity is there. If not, other countries will emerge as potential players in this scenario.
Definitely, there's a huge collaboration. I think this year has been a tough year because elections were in Mexico last June, and elections will be held in November here in the US. So sometimes through the candidates start to face arguing ideas that put the US and Mexico in a difficult position sometimes. But I think that Mexico and the United States right now, for example, in the ports of entry, both sides are investing huge amounts of money to have a better technology and a better infrastructure. So this speaks the collaboration and the way to have a better commercial trade between both countries. Also, for example, Governor Durazo is working on the port of Guaymas. That is an important port that it will be a new option because right now we can see the Pacific Coast ports crowded, expensive. So Sonora through Arizona can make a better trade all the way through Guaymas, that it's like 360 kilometers just the south of the border. And we can increase this corridor with a lot of industrial parks also that will benefit for both sides.
Okay, thank you. So, I got two questions. One that keeps coming to mind is if investment is a path to, well, to put it simply, is it a path to restoring the state of Sonora? What I mean is that Arizona was part of Sonora once too, when the border wasn't there. And if the kind of collaboration that you're referring to, is a possibility where stakeholders on both sides, play a role at developing our mutual economy. Is that a path towards eliminating borders? Do you understand the question? It's probably more philosophical than economic, but.
I'll be candid. There was a little bit of the question that I didn't quite understand the context of making Sonora something. Sonora is really dynamic along the border. I guess I really don't envision a future where there is not a border. It's unfortunate, but I think sovereignty issues are going to make it so that we always have a border. It's just a matter of how we try to manage the demands between security and economic development. That's where we're going to have to get creative. I just think that one of the things from an infrastructure and investment perspective is that Arizona and Sonora have, I'm biased, but I've always been so impressed at how, because they're little, relative to the big giants, not only globally, but, next to us with Texas and California, that they've always had to think outside the box. And I think we've got some challenges that we already know about: water, energy, many of the topics that have been discussed today. And we're going to have to get creative about ways that we work together to solve those. Okay. And I think that's where the innovation has got to come, and that long history of relationship between our two states. And I think we do have a history of joint marketing, joint promotion of the region. And I think there's probably a good argument, although, we probably need to revisit just to kind of really understand that market opportunity for Arizona and Sonora to come together, to be able to go out to the world, to say, look, this is the dynamic place. Take a look at us. Because I think globally, sometimes it's hard to get on the radar because we're states, we're not a country, right? And so by having that unique relationship that tells companies and investors that, you come and it will flow and you'll get a return on investment, and you'll see that return and there'll be some real benefits. I think that's where our challenge lays ahead for us to try to figure out. So David, I don't know if that answered your question. Maybe I worked around that question, but anyway, for what it's worth.
Well, I'm probably just being an idealist. For me, when it comes to the issue of the border, it's about restoring our ancestral homeland. The Autumn Jebet, our original homeland, extend it from the Salt and Gila River valleys up here, all the way down to the mountains just north of Hermosillo. So our dream is to restore a sense of homeland where that border isn't bisecting our mother anymore. And so I was hoping that, I'm still hoping that the idealism that I'm hearing you guys express as a group might be a way for, at some level, for that sense of healing and unity, to occur again. How does the issue of social justice ever come up in discussions about an investment? Well, when social justice, I'm thinking about how the wealth that's generated is redistributed to the people. Because when I think about investment, when I think about market economy, I think about certain individuals making a lot of money, because that's how things work. And so, as a Native person, as a Mexican person, as somebody who grew up poor and working class, I'm wondering, how is all this investment that you're talking about, as you're picturing it, going to be shared with ordinary people?
I think Mexico government in the last 6 years has done a huge job on that. For example, the minimum payment for the workers was increasing 100% in the last 6 years. But it's obviously also part of the TechMed agreements. But I think Mexico, you cannot have big investments in social or security in our country if we pay low to our people. We need to get them better paid, obviously, to get them a better life. So I think Mexico in the last 6 years and will continue with trying to keep it up, the payments to the workers.
Yeah, thank you.
On a broader level, I think it's part of ESG. It's the S in ESG, the social, economic, social governance, which is one of the focus of contemporary business on how to deal better with the different stakeholders involved in economic activity. So yes, it's of course a key component of strategy and of contemporary business.
I agree. I think social justice has to be there, right? If you take the Asian example, first, since early 2000s when they became members of World Trade Organization, and they became this gigantic manufacturing hub, a lot was improved in terms of social workers. And I give you an example. A lot of apparel companies, they now have conditions that their suppliers have to attend to be a supplier. And if they are compliant with several social requirements, such as vacation, humane hours, no child labor, and so on, they get preferential financing rates from banks, but this is something that the companies are doing because their consumers are demanding. So I think the first stage is, it starts with economic growth. First you generate the growth, then there will be distribution, and then there will be social justice. One thing doesn't walk nowadays without the other, especially with American consumers. It's something, they want to know how things are produced, the origin of energy, which is something that was mentioned. So these are important requirements for the consumers in U.S., and it's reflecting through the chain.
All right, thank you. Can I ask the audience for a little help here? I'm running out of questions, and so I need to turn to you guys. to get the discussion going. See several hands going up. I think you were first, sir.
First, regarding the social justice, my question, they had some ideas. Some ideas have been expressed. Now, this is for infrastructure and investment. You had a great question. How does it affect, or what link there is this infrastructure and investment with social justice? My question is that if in all these ideas, projects, WIMAs, the roads, etc., they have thought about social infrastructure, which is, and I'm going to give you an example, a very nearby example. From Nogales, Sonora to Mariposa, there's a corridor called the Fiscal Corridor. When it was planned originally, it was going to be a fiscal corridor. No stops, so all the fresh fruit coming from Mexico will have a very, very clear. Marisa spoke one of the obstacles at that time, which were the Serena's points of reviewing. The fresh produce that was lost from the start point of the corridor to Mariposa was almost 50% of the value of the produce because of the delays of the trucks and because they have to. But one of the social negative impacts of that was that along the corridor, a lot of new scattered houses were built. No urban planning. Nowadays, and this is a question, I don't know if in all these ideas of nurturing, there's an idea of how you are going to fix that problem of housing, a lot of squatters, people unemployed, with no schooling. So I think that's what we have to think about. How are we going to include in all these projects, infrastructure, logistics, the needs of those who are going to be affected by that infrastructure. And I think that's where the solution lies, to plan in social infrastructure.
Great, thank you. Can I ask for responses from the panel to the gentleman's remarks? If not, we can move on to another question. Okay.
I think it's an important question. Everything that we are discussing here will have a social impact, some good, some bad. It won't reduce the barrier or the between countries, but it will make it more fluid. A lot of government regulation and investment on the social part will have to follow as well. When a company is investing in Mexico or any other developing country, the social, economic, educational aspect comes into it. What we've been seeing is where we have new companies and new investment that will be also in the service industry, not only in manufacturing or in farms. It will be in other sectors as well. There is a huge development that follows. That was true in Latin America, in many countries in Latin America. That was true in Asia. It's still true in India. And we should expect the same. I think the landscape, we tend to think 5-10 years, but the landscape in 50 years in the south of US and the north of Mexico will be completely different. Not only Mexico will be an important player for US, but maybe Mexico can be an important consolidator for Latin America. What we see in Middle East, with Dubai being the hub, or in Asia with Hong Kong and Singapore, Mexico could be it for Latin America. So again, someone asked if it's a time for a vision. Yeah, it's the time to dream and dream high, because the possibilities are there. Companies are interested in investing that will reflect in the social fabric of the region, and how Mexico also relates to the other neighbor countries.
I think social infrastructure is really important, and I will give an example. In the corridor from Nogales to Guaymas, the railroads in Nogales specific, well, right now, if we increase the capacity, if Guaymas, right now we have 3 trains daily that pass through the heart of Nogales, Sonora, and Nogales, Arizona. In Nogales, Sonora, it's 170 acres that they're going to get free, because right now, as a presidency project, they're being moved, the railroads from Imuris all the way up to the border. And the reality that we face is that in Mexico is easier maybe if the president wants to do a project from one year to another, he can make it possible. Here in the US, we know there's a plan and takes more years, and right now we're going to go to the border, but then it will be done a tunnel to go back to the original way where it crosses to the US. But this is the kind of social infrastructure needed to clean, for example, our cities, not to be crowded because of a train. And I think it's really clever that it's think at the same time that it's being done, the increasing capacity in Guaymas, doing and not waiting to have a bigger problem in Nogales.
Thank you. Other questions? I see a hand way in the back. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please. And then back here.
Quick for Marisa. You mentioned the lucid and the, let's say, joint promotion efforts in the past. I guess it was the only case that I know of that a state in the U.S. has asked for support to a Mexican state for a project, right, to work together. Since then, Arizona has grown in stature in projects, and now it's not $1 or $2 billion project, but I guess a dozen or so. So somehow the distance has elongated. Yet in the semicon industry, with the huge investment from TSMC and the others, I guess a huge chance not to replicate the Lucid example, but to piggyback on Sonora's capabilities and somehow support, not on a subsidiary basis, but somehow be the missing element, whether it's workforce, space, etc., to complement. Do you see a chance in the current, let's say, ECA plans to, let's say, think broader than the Phoenix metro area to do the semicon? Again, in a very tangible example of collaboration, right? Dreams, I love dreams, yet quick hits that somehow leave a path that we can all see, create traction for other, for more dreams.
This is not going to be a satisfying answer, Enrique, but you know, the amount of funding coming in around semiconductors is mind-boggling, right? And the opportunities for growth and workforce development and that kind of investment, it is clear as day that this is not something that can be contained in Arizona. And it's going to, like any major, big, bold effort, it is going to have you think outside of your box, your geographic box, to say, what is the regional approach to this? And I think this is where our long relationships with Sonora in particular, and I'm excited, thank you so much for sharing the roadmap with me today. It's been referenced a couple of times, but new to me, I hadn't seen it yet. And so I'm looking forward to kind of understanding that a little better, but I think there's already so many synergies that we have. We've got a core base base between Arizona and Sonora around several key clusters that are supportive, whether it's aerospace or medical device development, bio, or another obvious areas, and lots of opportunities around workforce development, because I think really when you talk about it, we don't talk enough, and apologies, David, because you guys are probably more astute to this. We are on the verge of a cliff with talent right now. If you look at the number of births that are coming in the horizon, we're not going to keep track with this at all. I'm sure there's conversations that are going on at the university to think, well, how are we going to prepare when we don't have that population? So part of the quick fix is going to be, how do I attract people from outside of the state to come in and, you know, keep the engine going? But we're going to have to start thinking, I don't want to get ahead of my skis because this is so much bigger than my pay grade. But the ways in which we chase businesses to come to the state, we're going to have to chase talent, and we're going to have to leverage that. And Sonora will be the obvious first opportunity because of our strong linkages and experiences working together. But just as Sonora has to look outside of its, we're going to have to look regionally, like the whole Southwest, broadly defined with the 6 Mexican states and the 4 U.S. states, to really think about how do we incentivize this boom, this broader nearshoring that really is bringing all this opportunity together. So, Enrique, I don't have all the answers. I just have strong confidence and optimism about what we've done in the past and where we're going, that there's going to be a path for us to really dig into that. And I've already told you that we've got to get a date to sit down and start talking about the semiconductor activities and how we leverage that going forward. So anyway, apologies if that wasn't elaborate enough, but.
Any other responses to this gentleman's? Okay, we'll go to the back of the room. Thank you.
Yes. My question is about connectivity. These days, internet connectivity is just like a utility. In other words, like water, electricity, and so on. And it's particularly important in integrating supply chains. And so I guess my question is, how is the connectivity between Arizona and Mexico in integrating supply chains? I just got back from Africa. Electricity would go out on a regular basis. You know, modems, routers, everything goes down. There were issues there. I assume financial payments are fully digitized so that everybody can be paid quickly. Just curious about, you know, the digital infrastructure between Arizona and Mexico.
Not there yet. That's the short answer, right? I mean, there is a lot being done in terms of trade. You're right. Flow of pace are going smoothly. There is a lot that can be done from U.S. to Mexico and vice versa. In terms of telecommunications, it works pretty well. But I think even your question, that there is one step ahead, which is, are we digitizing enough? Are we making it digital? So the answer is no. It's still to the level and to pursue the potential fully. It has to improve a lot. It has to improve a lot. The productivity at border has to improve manifold. So that's besides the roads construction, railway, which is already great between Mexico and U.S., needs to improve a lot.
Sir, do you still want to ask a question? Maybe we can get the mic to him, please, and then back over here with this other gentleman. And then over here, okay.
Thank you. I have a question, and I was impressed by your way of thinking that how can we get rid of the border, I mean literally get rid of the border and unite Arizona and Sonora in a way that they leverage their like it says here in the thematic, it says to leverage their proximity and partnerships to build a more competitive region with lower costs. We'll create a free zone that is integrate Arizona and Sonora in a free trade zone. That's no big deal constitutionally or anything, but that permits the free flow of goods, services, and money in the area. And that's leveraging the possibilities that are both sides. And then you get growth, you get the investment, and you get many people socially benefited. I think that hasn't been discussed yet, but if you create a free trade zone with a locus Arizona plus a locus of Sonora in the border, you come back to your idea about uniting the tribes again, because it's a way of uniting also people with history and culture that has the same foundations. It's an idea.
Yeah, thank you for your observation. Does anybody want to respond to his idea of a free trade zone? Otherwise, I'm going to go to the next question. Let's go to the gentleman in the back there. He's standing now.
Thank you. So a couple of you have alluded to educational infrastructure, which I think is very, very important. And I think Transborder Studies and IRASEMA are trying to do something in that regard. I think ASU is as well. I work for the community college system, the Maricopa County Community College System, and I would ask you if you can suggest what role the community college would have in creating that educational infrastructure to better prepare communities here to engage in the transborder community and perhaps partner with Sonora, and this is under AMC perhaps, to have educational institutions, Sonora, partner with Arizona and create educational opportunities that help this infrastructure so that you can make everything more fluid in terms of businesses and technology and engineering, et cetera.
Responses, community colleges.
I think there's a huge opportunity to open more the dialogue between the private sector and the public sector on both sides. For example, Sonora, the last years have been seeing how the semiconductor industry investments that are being made here in Arizona, how can Sonora can complement this industry, the suppliers, because Sonora is recognized by a labor works high quality. So maybe Arizona will not be able to have all the workers on their suppliers or to have everything in here. So how we made from these both states, from different countries, a mega region, so we can complement on the needs of each side. And obviously, education, human talent is fundamental, and it's being worked right now with the Universidad de Sonora and ASU. They already signed for semiconductor industry to start working and having better capacities.
My next questioner disappeared. Any other questions? No, it looks like we hit all of the high points. Well, obviously, I run a very efficient classroom. And so I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Can we give our panel a nice round of applause?